ask, or come up to me and ask, or whatever, that would just show that they completely had no idea how pregnancy worked, how reproduction works, and so they almost couldn't access, in the same way they struggled to access the book about Emmett Till because they didn't understand even what racism was. Some of it wasn't just them being kids who were taught to be racist, some of it was just kids who have never learned about this subject. The same with sex. A lot of the kids are just, they literally can't understand the book because no one has ever addressed the topic with them. Or they've addressed it, you know, typically, as for me as a Mormon girl, I was just taught abstinence. So if you probably had asked me at 14, how, you know, can you get pregnant with just one time having sex? When is a woman more likely to get pregnant versus another? What is ovulation? You know, these questions, I would have stared at you with a blank face, and my face probably would have turned very red. And so I think that that was another thing that I thought about as I was teaching this book, is just how uneducated the students were. We had also had a training that year about sexual abuse and learned some statistics around sexual abuse. And I remember the stat that I learned that year was that 1 out of every 4 girls will experience some form of sexual abuse by the time they're 18. And the number for boys is 1 out of 6 boys will experience that. And we also discussed in these trainings, because you're a mandatory reporter as a teacher, so you have trainings about child abuse, sexual abuse, familial abuse, you know, you discuss all of these different things, drug abuse, that the kids might experience, so that you are somewhat prepared to respond when they bring them up. If a student were to bring this up to you, so that you would know to report it, you would know the process, you would know who to tell them to consult with. And one of the things that we discussed is that teaching kids about sex and sexuality is actually a way to protect them from abuse, teaching them body part names, teaching them personal body boundaries, learning about secrets and what to do if someone asks them to keep a secret about something. That basically having some amount of sex ed protects students from abuse, to protect teenagers, kids from abuse. And I just recall that training and how it was so clear and apparent that an abstinence-only sex education for these students had led to them having no idea about really anything, and asking the most bizarre questions, and also making it clear that maybe they were more willing to ask me than they were even willing to ask their parents, and me kind of trying to turn them away and saying, hey, why don't you ask your parents that, was probably ultimately not helpful, because maybe they weren't even willing to broach the subject with their parents. Another memorable moment with some of these students was when I was sitting at my desk grading some papers. It was a passing period, and my ears perked up because I heard Joseph Smith, and this was in the second half of the year. So at this point, I was fully no longer believing in Joseph Smith. I feel like I basically lost my testimony over Christmas break, and so by that point, I was not a believer. I don't even think I was attending church at that point. And I remember hearing Joseph Smith, and my ears kind of perked up, and I tuned in, and one of the students was explaining that Joseph Smith was a polygamist, and that he had had lots of wives, and that he had been sealed to them.